7 justices of the Colorado Supreme Court have given no indication how they will rule on Trump's disqualification under the 14th Amendment, and they have given no indication when they will rule. But here is a bigger issue. They have no right to rule. The 14th Amendment clearly, unquestionably, inarguably, and eternally states that an insurrectionist cannot serve in an elected federal or state office or a lot of other offices, and it does not allow Chief Justice Boatwright or Justice Birkencotter or Justice Gabriel or Justice Hart or Justice Hood or Justice Marquez or Justice Samore or, for that matter, Chief Justice Roberts or Justice Sotomayor or anybody else on that court to overrule the Constitution, because the 14th Amendment already has a means by which disqualified traitors may appeal. The drafters of the 14th Amendment built that remedy in, and they have already designated 2 bodies to overrule disqualification under special circumstances, and those bodies are the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. And if they each vote by 2/3 to let Trump back on the ballot, he is back on the ballot. That is, for all practical purposes, in the Constitution. And if they don't vote by 2/3, he's not on the ballot. And that is also, for all practical purposes, in the Constitution. The entirety of the Trump and fascist party arguments against disqualification under the 14th Amendment are 2 utter fictions, unsupported by the Constitution or by the amendment or by the history of this country or by the history of the men who wrote the goddamned 14th Amendment as they were still wiping up the blood from the floor of this country after the first Civil War. The fictions are that this has to go through the courts. It does not. It has to go through the Congress. But the other one, even before that, the legal whore representing Trump in front of the Colorado State Supreme Court, this gasbag Scott Gessler, the ex-Colorado Secretary of State who lost that job after he was found guilty of ethics violations. Gessler has manufactured out of thin air this hallucination that the president was not a mere officer of the United States, like senators or congressmen or state office holders, and that the authors of the 14th Amendment phrase the disqualification clause in such a way as to clearly and deliberately exclude would-be presidents because they were more important, and their selection represented the true will of the American people. Bullshit! When the 14th Amendment was adopted, the President of the United States was a lesser figure than the average senator or the average congressman. The 14th Amendment was ratified on July 9th, 1868. And at that point, the President of the United States was Andrew Johnson. And the Senate had just spent 18 months trying to neuter Andrew Johnson. And they took away his right to readmit the southern states. And they passed legislation denying him the right to fire cabinet members, specifically Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. And when he tried to do it anyway, the House passed 11 articles of impeachment against Andrew Johnson. And the Senate acquitted him on May 16th, 1868, and by only 1 vote, and that senator and others had been bribed to vote to acquit the president. They wrote the 14th Amendment over the objections of President Andrew Johnson, and the clause that disqualified all insurrectionists for all time but gave Congress the right to vote to overrule that by a 2/3 vote, was written that way because they wanted to emphasize that it was Congress that would make that choice and not the president, and especially not that president. We forget, but skipping Lincoln, the preceding 9 presidents of the United States had been, going backwards from the day the 14th Amendment was passed, Andrew Johnson, James Buchanan, Franklin Pierce, Millard Fillmore, Zachary Taylor, James K. Polk, John Tyler, William Henry Harrison, and Martin Van Buren, and not one of them had been reelected. We changed presidents 10 times in 30 years, and only Lincoln got a second chance. The presidency was not imperial, and it was not more important, and it was not exalted. But it's more than just that. The 14th Amendment, the one disqualifying insurrectionists from office in this country forever, was principally conceived and written by two committees, one in the House, one in the Senate, on Reconstruction. The one in the Senate included Thaddeus Stevens, who wanted to take all the money from all the insurrectionists in the South and give it to the freed slaves. And it contained Senator Roscoe Conkling, so respected as a lawyer, as a jurist, as a constitutional scholar, that two presidents asked him to serve on the Supreme Court, and he said no thanks. But it was written principally by Congressman John Bingham of Ohio. John Bingham was a radical Republican who not only was one of the House managers for the impeachment of President Johnson, but earlier, John Bingham had been the Assistant Judge Advocate General during the trial of the accomplices of the man who murdered Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth. And if John Bingham's attitude towards insurrectionists was not clear enough from what is written in the 14th Amendment and what he did completely justifiably slow roasting President Andrew Johnson, just a reminder about the trial of the conspirators, the 8 co-conspirators charged in the Lincoln assassination that the co-author of the 14th Amendment prosecuted included Mrs. Mary Surratt, who ran the boarding house where the conspirators met, and it included Spangler, the stagehand at Ford's Theater who did nothing more than hold Booth's horse while Booth went in and murdered the president. They hanged half of the defendants, including the woman who ran the boarding house. 3 of the other 4 defendants were given life sentences. The guy who held the horse got 6 years at hard labor. They did make a concession to Mrs. Surratt. While they were preparing to hang her and the others, they let her sit in a chair. The authors of the 14th Amendment were not effing around about insurrectionists. So the idea that this legal whore taking money from Trump can walk into the Colorado Supreme Court and say with a straight face that the intent of the 14th Amendment was to disqualify insurrectionists, but not a president. You can't disqualify a president. A president is too big a deal. And that the justice could sit there without finding him in contempt of American history. It's a pathetic joke. Senator Stevens, and especially Congressman, hang Mrs. Surratt too, Bingham, were not excluding presidents from their amendment to the Constitution. They were not making sure that Jefferson Davis or Alexander Stevens or Nathan Bedford Forrest or Robert E. Lee or Donald Trump could still run for president after they tried to overthrow the goddamned government. It's not just nonsense. It is literally an insult to every American who died in the Civil War defending the Union and to the sanctity of the elections. It is an insult to Lincoln. It is an insult to this country. And so is this nonsensical idea that the state courts have to rule on whether or not Trump or any other insurrectionist scumbag and crazed violent revolutionary should be on the ballot for anything from president to dog catcher. Thaddeus Stevens and John Bingham's 14th Amendment is clearly self-executing. It is clearly automatic. It is the default position. If it were not self-executing, why would they have attached the actual key words to the 3rd clause, the disqualification clause? why would they have attached the final 14 words of the damn thing? Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disqualification. If the 14th Amendment was not automatic, why would you need a postscript permitting the House and the Senate to override it under special circumstances? If everybody seemingly disqualified under it for trying to overthrow our government was to be judged separately and individually based on which office he was running for and how menacingly he tried to overthrow the government, if it was up to a judge or a court or the Supreme Court, you wouldn't need a Senate and House override, and that would not be written into the amendment. Simply put, the states do not have the right to put Donald Trump or any of the other January 6th insurrectionists and insurrectionist plotters on their ballot. The Constitution is explicit. There is already a mechanism by which Trump could be put on the ballot. And there is only one mechanism and only one action by only one group by which Trump can override the 14th Amendment to be put on the ballot. And it is exactly what Thaddeus Stevens and the others and John Bingham wrote in 1866, Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 in each house. The Colorado Supreme Court hearing is, regardless of the outcome, a farce. There is due process available, even to Trump. It is right there in the Constitution. You know, the Constitution, the thing Trump has vowed and promised to terminate. He is ineligible. I suspect if Thaddeus Stevens and John Bingham came back to life today and were briefed on this, their response would be to chase Trump with their canes. Oh, and if this farce were not stupid enough, if it were not unconstitutional enough, this disgraced ex-state Secretary of State, Trump's stooge Gessler, who seems to have gotten his law degree as a prize in a box of Cracker Jacks, is also an idiot.
What if we narrowed it to say prevent the peaceful transfer of power of the United States government? Would that be an insurrection?
To prevent the peaceful transfer? I don't think so, and I'm not sure, Your Honor. Look, I mean, if you look at historically in the context of how insurrection was used, I mean, it has to be for a substantial duration, not 3 hours.
An insurrection has to last more than 3 hours. Gotcha. If your insurrection lasts more than 3 hours, see your doctor immediately because you, Mr. Gessler, appropriately enough, are a dick. My rage about the 14th Amendment notwithstanding, sometimes the unimportant things make the most important impact. I didn't even flinch when Hannity tried to get the would-be dictator Trump to take advantage of a chance to lie and say he would not be a dictator, but Trump was too stupid to take it. But a whole lot of other people flinched, big time. The symbolism of this enemy of the United States of America making a big joke about how he'd only be a dictator from the instant he regained power, but he'd stop after one day. That may have actually cut through the noise.
Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight, you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Yeah. Except
Look,
for?
He's going crazy. Except for day one. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Once again, they have people paid to do this. But there, President Biden, my old friend, is your re-election campaign commercial. There are millions of people in America who not only don't know who the president is, they don't know who the president was, and they don't know who the next president might be. They are the ones who need to hear him saying that. Because refusing to even lie and assure your most loyal anti-democracy propagandist that you aren't going to be a dictator and saying, yeah, I am, but just for a day, that can cut through. Take the tape, write one strong opening line like, Donald Trump is running for dictator of America, and get some voiceover guy to kill the read. Then you run the clip. Then you get the president to say, I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message, and you're done. It'll make Lyndon Johnson's Daisy commercial look like a public service announcement on C-SPAN. Wait, you know the Lyndon Johnson Daisy commercial, right? After Barry Goldwater mused about using nuclear weapons. The Daisy commercial ran once. Middle of the NBC Monday night movie on September 7th, 1964. Once. This ran once.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes to make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Once. It ran once. Let's try it again. Let's update it, shall we?
6, 8, 9, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
what?
he's going crazy. Except for day one. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Biden on November 5th. The stakes are too high for you to stay home. Any questions? Yeah, by the way, I'll do the read for that one for free. Couple of more headlines. All of the Trump fake electors in Wisconsin flipped yesterday. They had been sued civilly, and as part of the settlement, they promised never to do it again and to cooperate with the federal prosecutors. Meanwhile, the 6 fake electors in Nevada were all indicted by that state. Among them is the state National Republican Committee man Jim DeGraffenreid and Nevada GOP chair Michael McDonald, who did not have a three-way with the co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Bridget Ziegler, and the Florida GOP chair Christian Ziegler. Speaking of which, if you're thinking of Nikki Haley as some kind of viable option, last night at debate number, I don't know, as the old SNL joke goes, welcome to the 4th or 5th Republican debate. Nikki Haley last night tissed DeSantis by saying his Don't Say Gay bill did not go far enough. Well, obviously it did not go far enough for Mr. and Mrs. Ziegler, did it? Kevin McCarthy is going to quit Congress. So now, if a Democrat wins the vacant George Santos seat, almost a certainty, the GOP margin in the House will be down to 2 votes. The margin becoming reduced to 220 to 214. Well, how in the hell is a margin of 6 just 2 votes? New math? Because a tie in the House, it's not like the Senate. There's no tie-breaking vote. A tie in the House is a no. You have to get 218 votes to pass anything. Speaker Johnson will only have 220 votes to play with, and now, literally, any 2 House Republicans can stop anything they personally don't like. Bon chance, Mikey. And you may have heard Mike Pence has been added to the potential witness list in Georgia by Fani Willis. It's way bigger than just that. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution saw the entire expanded witness list, and sure, it's Pence and Bill Barr and Jeffrey Rosen and Richard Donahue from Justice and Steve Bannon and Congressman Scott Perry, who, by the way, is also ineligible under the 14th Amendment. And also on the witness list, Georgia officials like Governor Brian Kemp, former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, Attorney General Chris Carr, and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, all of whom are not ineligible under the 14th Amendment. And don't effing make me dig up Thaddeus Stevens to prove this, because he would be in a really, really bad mood. Also of interest here, oh great, Elon Musk just let Tucker Carlson put Alex Jones back on Twitter. And why, yes, I did sell a 1914 Babe Ruth Baltimore Orioles rookie baseball card for 7 figures. Why do you ask? That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In sports, Dateline, New York. He reached Major League Baseball on May 20th, 2018, and the rumors that he would wind up with the New York Yankees began on May 20th, 2018. It reportedly came true last night. Juan Soto reportedly traded from the San Diego Padres to the Yankees, along with outfielder Trent Grisham, for young pitchers Michael King, Randy Vasquez, and Johnny Brito, top pitching prospect Drew Thorpe, and the catcher Kyle Higashioka. Soto is an offensive juggernaut who also gets walked an average of 133 times a season. On the other hand, the Washington Nationals did not hesitate to dump him for salary reasons at age 23. And San Diego, which needed $50 million in September in a loan just to meet payroll, has now dumped him for salary reasons at age 25. And all the Yankee fans who are proclaiming themselves the 2024 world champions have already forgotten they said exactly the same thing when they traded for Giancarlo Stanton. Oh, and the Yankees have won one World Series since the year 2000, which is the longest drought in franchise history. Dateline, Nashville, Tennessee. 3 months after he got angry at reporters who suggested he was thinking of moving the Chicago White Sox out of Chicago after 123 seasons there, and then said, you know, his lease is up in 6 years, so, quote, we've got to decide what the future is going to be. Chicago White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf, the biggest clown in sports, bigger even than Hal Steinbrenner of the Yankees, more of a clown than 2 Hal Steinbrenners. Jerry Reinsdorf has reportedly met with the mayor of Nashville, Tennessee. That city is pushing hard for a major league franchise of any kind it can get. Reinsdorf previously blackmailed the state of Illinois into a new ballpark by agreeing to move the White Sox to Tampa Bay in 1988. Then he backed out of that deal. Now he's not happy with the new stadium Illinois gave him. But moved to Nashville? I mean, nice city. But in terms of DMAs, designated market areas, how you make your money in sports, Nashville is 29th in this country. TV household population is 1,011,000 people. Chicago, by that same measure, is 3rd. The population is 3 times that size. So even if you were only to get 35% of the Chicago baseball market, you'll be getting more people than you would get in Nashville. Nashville is also a smaller market than Portland, Orlando, Charlotte, and Indianapolis. But go ahead. Move to Nashville from Chicago, Jerry, because that's the kind of thinking that has brought the White Sox 1 championship since 1906. Thank you, Nancy Faust. Actually, you're welcome, Nancy Faust. Dateline Baltimore. So I got asked again last night, that Babe Ruth baseball card, his rookie card from 1914, when he had just started his professional career as a pitcher with the then minor league Baltimore Orioles before he was sold to the Red Sox, let alone sold to the Yankees. You know, the card that sold at auction for $7,200,000? No, it was not mine. I had one. I sold mine early in 2020 for $1 million. And no, I'm not sorry I did. This one graded very good, a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. The one I sold for 1/7 the price, it looked nicer on the front, but half of the back is missing. I think it's been graded authentic, which means it's not even considered poor. If I auctioned it off now, I might get more for it, maybe 50% more, maybe twice as much. I mean, the guy who lost that auction was clearly willing to go like $7 million flat for that one. So if you have one at home, sell it. There aren't that many of the Babe Ruth 1914 cards, and they are spectacular artifacts of baseball history. They're almost religious iconography. Ruth is shown skinny, young, just after the truant's home, but that devilish smile and broad face are beginning to be recognizable. It is some baseball card. But I sold mine for a couple of reasons. One, it was the beginning of 2020, and you might remember there was that pandemic just underway, and nobody really knew how that was going to turn out. And I thought, hey, maybe now is the time to have that cash, not the card. Plus, I bought it either in 1999 or 2000 for only about $20,000, $25,000, $50,000 maybe. I don't know. If a profit of 4,900% on a baseball card is not enough for you, well, not enough for me, it's time to get a full physical, including a mental health test. More importantly, I'm a set collector. I bought the Ruth because it was cool, and I hope to complete the set produced by the Baltimore News newspaper, showing both the minor league Baltimore Orioles and the old Baltimore Terrapins of the long-defunct Federal League. But the set is really scarce, not just the Ruth card. I have only seen about 6 of the other cards from the set, let alone other Babe Ruths, turn up in all these years. My collection of 1914 Baltimore News cards with 20 years trying consisted of 2 cards, the Babe Ruth and the Gus Gleichman. So I had 2, and I still needed 22 to complete the set. I don't like that. I have the famous 1909 Hannes Wagner, and in fact, I have an even rarer proof version of the same card, which Hannes Wagner himself used to own. And I wanted to get a Hannes Wagner when I was 11 years old, and I started collecting the set he's in, American Tobacco T206, they call it, when I was 11 years old. But if I didn't collect American Tobacco T206, I wouldn't have gotten a Wagner. But I do, so I did. You have to have it to complete your set. That and all the other 523 cards in the set, and hundreds of different color variations, and a bunch of proof cards of players who wound up being dropped from the set, and they're really cool. Because I'm a set collector. I'm an anal retentive. As I think Diane Keaton said of Woody Allen in one of his films, that's the nice term for what you are. So, I don't have the 1914 Babe Ruth card anymore. I do like my Babe Ruth collection. When he hit his 500th home run in 1929, the year my folks were born, my dad would have been 13 days old when Babe Ruth hit his 500th home run. My mom would have been just shy of 2 months old. Babe Ruth bought it from the fan who ran down the home run in Cleveland as it bounced around past the outfield wall, a guy named Jake Geyser. He gave Jake Geyser $20 for it in 1929, and then he gave the baseball to his pal, one of the earliest of the true baseball collectors, the comedian Joe E. Brown. He inscribed it to Joe Brown and everything, and Brown put a screw into the bottom of the ball and displayed it on a little marble pedestal. And guess where Babe Ruth's 500th home run is right now, including the pedestal? Yep, right in there, behind the studio wall. So I'll keep that. Of course, if you want to make me an offer, I might listen. Still ahead of us on Countdown, I was just talking to another woman with another charming British accent, and she said another word that I mistook because of the accent for a different word. And that flashed me back to this time of year, 1985. I would have sworn to you on my life that that British woman had said her last name was Carlton. It is some story, because her name was not Carlton, and it's coming up in things I promise not to tell. By the way, when I tapped on the door to the studio, the door opened. Oops. First, time for the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. Worse, Mayor Eric Adams of New York. Actually, this is good news. This is a positive sign that my fellow residents and denizens here of Fun City are paying attention. Quinnipiac, polling Gotham on its opinion of its mayors since 1996, is out with the first poll on Adams, and his approval rating is 35% among Democrats. It's 28% among all New Yorkers. They would compare it to one of the other turds we've had recently, Giuliani, de Blasio, but this is the worst they have ever polled for a New York mayor since they started in 1996. But don't worry, Mayor Adams is unfazed. After all, as he once said, I thank God I'm the mayor right now. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. Just get him out of here. I don't care how you get him out. Just get him out of here. Worser. Speaking of get him out of here, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you know the QAnons and half the Republicans want the death penalty for anybody who was ever on the plane owned by Jeffrey Epstein. Well, guess what Jesse Waters, little Jesse of Fox News, asked RFK Jr. You weren't ever on Jeffrey Epstein's jet, were you? And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. answered, I was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet 2 times. My wife had some kind of relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. Wait, what? 2 times and your wife had a relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell? So RFK Jr. has to be military tribunaled, right, Republicans? But the winner, the worst, Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk and Alex Jones. Remember Tucker Carlson? Remember Elon Musk? Remember Alex Jones? When Musk bought Twitter, even he had the self-respect and self-awareness to continue the ban on the psychopath and Sandy Hook denier Alex Jones. Well, guess who he's platforming now? In a video by Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones. A video in which Carlson says Jones predicted 9/11. He didn't. And that 9/11 was an inside job. It wasn't. Oh, and this comes on the same day as Republicans in the Senate blocked a new assault weapons ban. Alex Jones, Sandy Hook denier. And there was another mass shooting at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas. Alex Jones, Sandy Hook denier, platformed by Elon Musk. Nice work, Musk. Here's an idea. The next rocket you send up, make it self-driving like your incendiary cars. And make sure you and Tucker and Alex Jones are on it with you, scumbag. Carlson insane, Jones insane, Musk insane. Today's worst persons in the world! Now to the number 1 story on the countdown and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. And I swear, I thought I heard her say Carlton. This was also December in 1985 in Los Angeles. And if you've never spent Christmas in a warm metropolitan area for the first time in your life, you do not know what disorientation really is. I had just completed 3 months in my new job as the sports director of Channel 5 in L.A. I had spent most of November adjusting not only to it not getting cold, but to the fact that almost nobody else noticed that it was not getting cold, except one of our production assistants, who sprinted through the parking lot and up the stairs into the little bungalow on the KTLA lot in Hollywood that housed our sports department. He shivered like a dog shaking himself awake and announced, "My God, it's bitter out there! Bitter!" I checked. It was 49 degrees. So, December 1985 was already weird enough. I was doing well in L.A., being 3,000 miles away from everyone and everything I knew had been surprisingly helpful. And there was no ramp-up time for my work. I'd already won a couple of Best Sportscaster awards, and then the top all-news radio station was asking me to come over every afternoon and split the afternoon drive sportscasting shift with a guy who'd been on the air there literally for 30 years, who's one of the voices in the background in The Godfather Part 2. And now, somehow, my producer Ron Grelnick and I were headed to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel to go interview Mickey Mantle. For the average L.A. sportscaster, there really wasn't much reason to interview Mickey Mantle, which is why all of them at the bigger 3 network stations had turned down the offer of a sit-down interview. But I was a New Yorker and had been 3 months earlier, and thus Mickey Mantle was my idol. And moreover, when I became a baseball fan in 1967, my folks bought tickets specifically behind first base at Yankee Stadium because they had just moved Mantle there from the outfield. And as my dad said, when you are an old man, you will say the greatest thing you ever saw in baseball was Mickey Mantle. So you might as well see as much of him as you can. Well, I'm an old man now, and my dad was exactly right. Mantle was on a tour publicizing some kind of hitting video, and he would do one exclusive interview with an L.A. station at like exactly 5 p.m. on that night in December 1985. And to get it, you had to agree to give the video exactly one plug and ask him one question about it. But otherwise, you could ask whatever you wanted. You had 15 minutes, then he was going out to dinner. Yeah, that was it, dinner. So Ron and I pulled up to the Beverly Wilshire in his car, and I had never been in, but I had walked past it a dozen times, and I knew there was a new wing and an old wing, and as Ron tried to park, I tried to find the room where Mantle would be waiting for us so I could be there to meet the camera crew that was joining us from some other shoot somewhere, and also because he was Mickey Mantle. I had met him before. I had even interviewed him briefly for CNN, but nothing like this, nothing like a sit-down interview, just me and him. The room number was something like 897. Could have been 597, could have been 1297, but it was basically the highest number there could be on a given hotel floor. And I saw the elevator just past the registration desk, and up I went to the 8th floor, and it was a deserted labyrinth. Turn after turn, and nobody there, and then suddenly I turned a corner, and walking towards me was the most elegantly dressed older couple I had ever seen to that point or since. She was wearing a mink stole atop a beautiful gown, and she had a diamond necklace big enough to induce cramps. She had a piercing, glistening set of deep brown eyes. She looked to be in her mid to late 50s, but might have been older. He was older, maybe 80, but with a full head of thick and wiry hair. He was tall, thin, extraordinarily elegant, in a perfect tuxedo. But all of this was overwhelmed, almost erased by one fact that startles me still 37 years later. This man was wearing a cape. I'm pretty confident that I had never seen a man wearing a cape before. I know I have not seen one since I have been looking, and yet it looked so good on him that I can recall briefly thinking, Keith, maybe you should buy a cape. This couple was perfect. We seemed to be the only people on the floor. The hallway wasn't all that wide. I said good evening as I passed. She said good evening, and in so doing revealed a British accent, and he mumbled good evening and revealed what sounded like the lingering minor aftermaths of a minor stroke. They walked their way, I walked mine, and my focus returned to finding Mickey Mantle in room 897. The numbers of the rooms I was passing were like 811 and 814, and after a few more turns of the labyrinth, it dawned on me that I must be in the old wing of the Beverly Wilshire, and the high numbers like 897 must have been in the new wing of the Beverly Wilshire. I also noticed that I had not passed a doorway or a vestibule or some kind of connecting bridge to the new wing, so I had better make it back to the elevator and the lobby before Ron or the camera crew made the same mistake I had, because Mickey Mantle was waiting. I reversed course. I began to trot, After 3 or 4 more of these labyrinthine turns, I found, to my shock, that the perfectly elegant older couple, he was wearing a cape, was standing exactly where I had left them. She laughed. She mentioned something about the higher numbers being in the new wing, and everybody made that mistake. I thanked her. And then she said, "You're the young man who does the sports on the television, aren't you?" And I had gotten pretty popular pretty fast there, but being recognized was still very surprising, and pleasantly so, and I said that, and I introduced myself. "So nice to meet you," she said. "I'm Patricia Carlton, and this," she pointed to the guy in the cape, "is my husband." He slowly extended a hand, but shook mine vigorously. "And I'm Joseph Carlton." Mrs. Carlton was very excited. "You know, Joe and I, we really are not fans of the sports. But whenever we're at home in Palm Springs, we make sure we stay up until the end of the 10 o'clock news so we can watch you." Joe nodded and smiled in the cape. "You're so clearly enjoying yourself that we find ourselves enjoying it too. That's really quite remarkable." I was genuinely touched and remained so. I explained my dilemma. I treated them as you are supposed to treat viewers, gratefully and solicitously, and I asked them if they were going to the lobby and if I might walk with them so I didn't get any further lost. "We'd be delighted. I must ask you, Mr. Fishman, who does the news on your program, is that his real hair?" She saw my shock at the question. "Joe and I have often worn wigs, and we can't be certain. That means if it is a wig, it's a good one." We reached the elevator bank, and I pushed down. He was walking slowly. He must have had a stroke. Still, he was an imposing figure of a man, and not just because he was wearing a cape. As I steered them away from the subject of our anchorman's toupee and talked instead about my Mickey Mantle interview, I realized he looked extremely familiar, like I knew him. Joseph Carlton. Kept rolling the name over in my mind. And Patricia Carlton. Who are they? The elevator light went off and a very loud bell sounded. The doors opened and there was my producer, Ron, and the 2-man camera crew, and the reporter who had been with them on the previous story, Sam Chu Lin, who had stayed with them because he wanted to meet Mickey Mantle. And as I joked to my new friends, Joe and Patricia Carlton, "Oh, look, here's my camera crew," its 4 members made no motion to even leave the elevator. They all looked dumbstruck. Sam Chu Lin's eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his head. I assumed this was because my new friend Joe was wearing a cape. Finally, I got the crew to move. I held the door open so Joe and Patricia could get into the elevator. I actually said, "Such a pleasure to meet you, and of course, thank you so much for watching Channel 5 News at 10. And she smiled warmly, and he managed a quick wave, and the doors closed. And only at that exact moment did it dawn on me where I knew him from. The blood now drained from my face as I turned to talk to the camera crew and Ron and Sam. You guys knew who those 2 people were, right?" Sam laughed at me. "Of course we did. Didn't you?" And I sighed. Oh my God, she said her name was Patricia Carlton, and that was her husband, Joseph Carlton, and she said it that way because she's British, and that's how, if you're British, you would say the name Cotton. She's Patricia Cotton, and he's Joseph Cotton, who was in Citizen Kane. I remember I actually put my hand on the wall and my face in my other hand. I just met Joseph Cotton, and I didn't recognize him. And the cameraman, Martin Clancy, who also often said things like this, said, "Pretty stupid of you, huh?" And I said, you know, you have no idea how stupid. I mean, obviously, I know who Joseph Cotton is. And Sam Chu Lin said, "You sure about that?" I gave him a dirty look, and I said, no, it's worse than this. In 1948, the president of the International Joseph Cotton Fan Club was my mother. There is a picture of that man with my mother from like 37 years ago at the Stork Club. They all laughed. Then Sam Chu Lin said, in that photo, is he wearing that cape? My gaffe did serve to relax me a little for the interview with Mantle. My gaffe, when I get over it, I'll let you know. So anyway, we all reached room 897 or whatever it was in the new wing of the Beverly Wilshire. And as the crew set up, I managed to tell the story of the Cottons to Mickey Mantle. And he said, "Yeah, I saw them in the lobby a couple hours ago. He's a great actor. I met him in New York. Must be 30 years ago. Did you say hi? Oh, right. You just told me you didn't recognize him." Mickey Mantle was busting my chops. As I said, I had met him before, even interviewed him before, but this was our first sit-down, and he was in a good mood, even expansive and playful. And at one point, he stunned me. I said, "I know you only have a couple of minutes left, so forgive me if I'm bringing up something that takes more than a couple of minutes." And he interrupted, and he said, "Take as much time as you need. I'm enjoying us talking." So I asked him about this one subject, how he felt about what he did in his career, considering how injured he was. When he retired, Mickey Mantle was third all-time in homers. He hit 310 times. He played in 12 World Series on one bad knee and one worse knee. Mantle got very reflective and self-critical. We used this soundbite at the end of his obituary that I would do for ESPN a decade later. "If I'd known I was going to live so long," he told me, "I would have taken better care of myself and done better." I said, "Well, he'd done pretty good. I could have done better." I thanked him. Then as the cameraman moved to get the shots of me nodding and repeating a question or two, Mickey Mantle said, "That was really good." I flushed. I got to ask you something. Can you give me some pointers?" I suddenly had no idea what the word pointers meant. Pointers? What are pointers? Mantle said he was going to do some Yankee games the next year on cable with Mel Allen. "I'm doing interviews after games. I'm no damn good at interviews. Just now you were moving from topics to topics so smooth. How do you keep all the questions in your head?" Now I laughed. I didn't keep them in my head. Didn't you see my cheat card? And he laughed and he said no, and I showed it to him. I said, "It's just a business card with like 7 key words written on the back. If I think I might freeze up because I'm nervous, because I'm interviewing Mickey Mantle, or I just met Joseph Cotton and I didn't recognize him, I make one of these cards, I hide it in the palm of my hand, and if I get stuck, I can just look down quickly and see one of the words, and I've got the question. I've got this card to remind me." Mickey Mantle's eyes glowed. "But wait," he said, "we're using these mics," and he pointed to the clip-on his shirt, so you don't have to hold a mic. What do you do if you have to hold the mic like I'll have to in an interview after a ball game? What if the card would fall out, or you have to shake hands with the player? And I said, "Well, just write the words on your hand. Whichever hand is holding the mic, like below the thumb." Mickey Mantle looked at me as if I had just given him the secret of eternal life. "Wow." He said, "That's great. I'm going to write this down. Thanks." And we were packed up, and he actually walked me to the hotel room door and gave me a double-handed handshake. So it had been a big day, even if I didn't realize it was Joseph Cotton. Mickey Mantle had asked me for advice about anything. Somehow I had thought of something to tell him, and he was really happy about the advice. And, of course, this provided a punchline the following spring. We were in the studios at KTLA watching on the satellite feed as the Yankees' first cable telecast of the 1986 season ended, and sure enough, they threw it down to Mickey Mantle on the field interviewing some player, and one of our producers said, "Oh, let's see if he remembers the lesson you gave him." And another one said, "Here's your student, Mickey Mantle." And sure enough, after the first answer, Mickey Mantle pauses, and I know he can't remember what he wanted to ask next. And sure enough, I see him cheat his look down slightly towards the hand, holding the microphone, and the next thing I see, he's kind of tilted the microphone sideways, and he's asking the question, but you can barely hear him because the mic is pointing off at a 45-degree angle, because he has written his key reminder words not below the thumb on the outside part of his hand, but on the palm side of his hand, and he's had to move the mic out of the way to read the words on the palm of his hand, and the producer says, "Ha ha ha, well now Mickey Mantle hates you." I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Countdown has come to you from the Vin Scully studios at the Olbermann Broadcasting Empire in New York. My mother, when I called her that day to tell her that I had met Joseph Cotton and not recognized him until the exact last minute that the elevator doors closed, my mother said, you know, he was not very talkative back at the Stork Club in 1947. Countdown musical directors Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums, produced by TKO Brothers. It explained at least, although it does underscore the fact that my mother held a grudge now and again, it was a photo. I saw it. I don't know where it is. I've looked for it. It's a photo of my mother at the Stork Club with Joseph Cotton, 1947 fan club meeting of some sort, and Joseph Cotton looks bored, and my mother looks even more bored. I'd pay somebody in my family to find that photo for me. You guys are listening, go ahead. Other music, including some of the Beethoven compositions arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed. The sports music, courtesy ESPN Inc., written by Mitch Warren Davis. We call it the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend John Dean. Everything else, pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 1066th day since Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the Insurrection Act against him and them while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.
6, 8, 9. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
what?
he's going crazy. Except for day one. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Biden on November 5th. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.